What happens when America's most outspoken late-night host comes face-to-face with one of the most controversial figures in modern celebrity culture? You won't believe what unfolds when Bill Maher decides to throw his legendary no-holds-barred approach at Meghan Markle during what was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance. This isn't your typical Hollywood puff piece. This is television gold that had viewers glued to their screens and social media exploding within minutes. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two powerhouses clash on live television. Last night's episode of Real Time with Bill Maher started innocently enough. The Duchess of Sussex walked onto the HBO set wearing her signature confident smile, perfectly styled in a cream-colored blazer that screamed expensive sophistication. The studio audience gave her the expected warm welcome. After all, this was supposed to be about her latest charitable endeavor and upcoming Netflix projects. But anyone familiar with Maher's interviewing style should have known this wouldn't stay pleasant for long. "Meghan, welcome to the show." Maher began with his characteristic smirk already forming at the corners of his mouth. "I have to say, it's refreshing to have someone on who's actually lived the American dream. Marrying into royalty and then immediately complaining about it." The comment landed like a slap. Markle's smile faltered for just a split second before she recovered, but the damage was already done. You could practically feel the temperature in the studio drop several degrees. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing they were about to witness something far more explosive than anyone had bargained for. "Well, Bill," Meghan replied, her voice maintaining its practiced calm, but with an edge sharp enough to cut glass. "I think that's a rather simplistic way to view someone's lived experience, don't you? I came here tonight to talk about important causes, not to rehash tabloid narratives." But Maher wasn't backing down. If anything, her defensive response seemed to energize him like blood in the water energizes a shark. He leaned forward in his chair, his eyes gleaming with the kind of mischievous intensity that has made him both beloved and reviled for decades. "Oh, come on," he pressed, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "You can't have it both ways, Meghan. You can't spend years giving tell-all interviews about how terrible your royal experience was and then act surprised when people have opinions about it. I mean, you literally went on Oprah and dropped bombshells about racism in the royal family, then signed multi-million-dollar deals to keep talking about it. At what point does victimhood become a brand?" The studio fell dead silent. This wasn't the gentle ribbing that talk show guests usually endure. This was a direct assault on Markle's entire public narrative. Her perfectly composed facade began to crack, and for a moment, viewers could see something raw and angry flash across her features. Markle's hands gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles whitening as she fought to maintain control. "That's incredibly unfair, Bill," she said, her voice now carrying a tremor that suggested barely contained fury. "You're reducing genuine experiences of discrimination and institutional racism to some kind of marketing strategy. That's not just offensive, it's dangerous." The word dangerous seemed to amuse Maher even more. He chuckled, that infuriating little laugh that has gotten him into trouble countless times before. "Dangerous? Really? You know what's dangerous? Throwing around accusations of racism without providing any actual evidence or naming names. You basically nuked the reputation of an entire institution based on your feelings, and then walked away counting your Netflix money." The audience was completely captivated now. Phones out, recording every moment of what was clearly becoming television history. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a public dismantling, and Markle was beginning to realize she had walked into an ambush. "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped, her careful media training finally starting to slip away. "You weren't there. You didn't experience what I experienced. You have no idea what it's like to be the only woman of color in that family, dealing with centuries of institutional prejudice while trying to serve the public." Maher's expression shifted to something between amusement and contempt. "The only woman of color? What about all the Commonwealth countries the royal family represents? What about the millions of people of color who are British subjects? You make it sound like you were some kind of pioneer instead of someone who married into the most privileged family on earth and then complained about the job requirements." The gloves were officially off now. What had started as typical Maher provocativeness had evolved into something much more intense, much more personal. Markle's breathing had become slightly labored, her perfect posture now rigid with tension rather than poise. "This is exactly the problem," she said, her voice rising despite her obvious efforts to control it. "This is exactly the kind of dismissive, privileged white male perspective that makes real change impossible. You're so comfortable in your bubble of late-night television success that you can't even conceive of experiences outside your own." The racial and gender dynamics were now front and center, turning what had been a celebrity interview into something that felt more like a cultural battleground. Maher's audience, normally ready to laugh at his provocations, seemed uncertain about how to react to this level of intensity. But Maher, true to form, seemed to thrive on the escalation. "Oh, so now we're playing the race and gender cards? How convenient. Every time someone questions your narrative, it becomes about discrimination. Maybe, and I'm just throwing this out there, maybe some people have legitimate criticisms of your behavior that have nothing to do with your race or gender." The studio was now crackling with tension so thick you could practically taste it. Markle's media-trained composure was hanging by a thread, and everyone present seemed to sense that they were witnessing something that would be replayed and analyzed for days to come. This was the kind of unscripted television moment that networks dream about and publicists have nightmares over. But this was just the beginning. As the commercial break approached, viewers could see Markle's jaw clenched tight, her eyes blazing with an anger that suggested the worst was yet to come. When the cameras rolled back to life after what must have been the most tension-filled commercial break in HBO history, the atmosphere in the studio had shifted dramatically. During those few minutes off-air, something had clearly transpired between host and guest that had pushed this confrontation to an entirely new level. Markle's posture had become even more rigid, if that was possible, while Maher wore the expression of a man who knew he had struck gold and wasn't about to let up. "Welcome back," Maher said with false cheerfulness that fooled absolutely no one. "We're here with Meghan Markle, and before the break we were discussing her unique perspective on royal life. Meghan, you seem to have something you wanted to add?" The way he emphasized unique perspective made it clear that whatever had happened during the commercial break had only emboldened him further. Markle's media training was now in full combat mode, but cracks were showing through her armor like fault lines in an earthquake. "What I wanted to add, Bill," she began, her voice now carrying a dangerous precision, "is that your entire approach to this conversation perfectly demonstrates the systemic issues I've been trying to highlight. You're using your platform to perpetuate harmful narratives while hiding behind the guise of comedy." Maher's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "Harmful narratives? Like what?" "Asking questions about inconsistencies in your story. Because I've got to tell you, Meghan, there are a lot of people out there who think some of your claims don't quite add up." "Such as?" The challenge in her voice was unmistakable now. This wasn't the polished Duchess anymore. This was someone who felt cornered and was ready to fight back with everything she had. "Well, let's start with the wedding," Maher said, settling back in his chair like he was getting comfortable for a long interrogation. "You claimed you got married 3 days before the televised ceremony, right? Just you, Harry, and the Archbishop of Canterbury in some private ceremony? But then the Archbishop himself had to come out and clarify that what you described wasn't actually a legal wedding. It was just, what did he call it? An exchange of vows?" The studio audience was now completely silent, hanging on every word. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was character assassination in real time, broadcast to millions of viewers. Markle's face flushed visibly. "That's a mischaracterization of—" "Is it, though?" Maher interrupted, his voice gaining momentum like a freight train. "Because it seems like you have a pattern of making claims that sound dramatic and meaningful but fall apart under scrutiny. Like when you said you had no idea who Harry was before you met him, despite having blogged about wanting to be a princess and posting photos of yourself outside Buckingham Palace. Now the gloves weren't just off. They were being used as weapons." Markle's breathing had become noticeably shallow, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the flush of anger and embarrassment creeping up her neck. "You're taking things out of context," she said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had carried earlier. "You're cherry-picking isolated incidents and weaving them into some kind of conspiracy theory." Maher leaned forward, sensing weakness like a predator. "Am I? Or am I just connecting dots that a lot of people have already connected? Like how you supposedly knew nothing about royal protocol, but somehow managed to execute a perfect curtsy when you met the Queen, despite claiming you thought it was all a joke? The audience was completely transfixed now. This wasn't just a talk show interview, it was a public evisceration, and everyone present seemed to realize they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. "That's enough," Markle said, her voice rising to a level that made everyone in the studio freeze. "You invited me here under false pretenses. This isn't an interview. This is a hit job." But Maher wasn't finished. In fact, her obvious distress seemed to fuel his attack rather than satisfy it. "A hit job? Really? I'm just asking the questions that millions of people want answered, like how you managed to play both the victim of royal racism and the empowered feminist who was going to modernize the monarchy. You can't be both the helpless victim and the strong revolutionary, Meghan. Watch me," she snapped. And for a moment, the mask slipped completely. This wasn't the carefully crafted public persona anymore. This was raw, unfiltered anger. "You want to talk about contradictions? Let's talk about how you built a career on supposedly speaking truth to power while consistently punching down at women and minorities." The accusation hit Maher like a physical blow. His expression shifted from smug satisfaction to something much darker, much more dangerous. The dynamic in the room changed instantly. What had been a one-sided attack was now a mutual destruction scenario. "Punching down?" Maher's voice had dropped to a register that longtime viewers knew meant trouble. "Lady, you married into a family worth billions of dollars and then played victim when they expected you to actually do the job. You want to talk about punching down? You punched down at every working-class person who actually has real problems while you collected millions for complaining about your palace being the wrong size." The studio was now a powder keg, with both participants locked in a battle that had moved far beyond the realm of typical celebrity interviews. This was personal now, vindictive, and getting uglier by the second. Markle's hands were visibly shaking now. Whether from anger or adrenaline was impossible to tell. "You're a bitter old man who's built his entire career on mocking people who actually try to make a difference in the world. At least I've used my platform to highlight real issues, instead of just sitting behind a desk making jokes about them." "Real issues?" Maher's laugh was harsh and cutting. "You mean like complaining that you only got to keep one of your wedding tiaras? Or crying about how hard it was to have servants? Those are the real issues you've been highlighting?" The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, with both participants now fully committed to mutual destruction. The audience seemed almost afraid to breathe, sensing that they were witnessing something that had crossed the line from entertainment into something much more serious and potentially damaging for everyone involved. But even as the tension reached what seemed like its breaking point, both Maher and Markle seemed to realize that they weren't finished with each other yet. The worst was still to come, and everyone in that studio could feel it building like a storm on the horizon. What happened next would go down as one of the most explosive moments in late-night television history. Maher, emboldened by Markle's obvious distress and sensing blood in the water, decided to go for the kill shot that would either make his career or destroy it completely. "You know what really gets me, Meghan?" he said, his voice taking on a tone of fake intimacy that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. "It's the sheer audacity of it all. You married into the most privileged position on earth, got everything handed to you on a silver platter, and then had the unmitigated gall to play victim when people expected you to actually earn it." Markle's face had gone from flushed to pale, her jaw working as she struggled to form words that could match the level of venom being directed at her. "You don't know what the fuck you're talking about," she finally managed, the profanity shocking everyone in the studio into absolute silence. The swear word hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. HBO might be cable television, but hearing a member of the British royal family drop an F-bomb on live television was something none of the viewers had ever expected to witness. The audience seemed collectively stunned, unsure whether to gasp or applaud. But Maher, rather than being shocked by her language, seemed delighted by it. "Oh, there it is, there's the real Meghan Markle. Not the carefully scripted Duchess. Not the polished humanitarian, just another Hollywood actress having a meltdown when someone calls her out on her bullshit." "My bullshit?" Markle was on her feet now, her chair spinning slightly from the force of her movement. "My bullshit? You want to talk about bullshit, Bill? Let's talk about how you've spent 20 years hiding your misogyny and racism behind the label of comedian. Let's talk about how you consistently platform people who spread hate while pretending to be some kind of progressive champion. The studio was electric now, with camera operators zooming in to catch every micro-expression, every gesture, every sign of the complete breakdown of civility that was happening in real time. This wasn't television anymore. This was a gladiatorial combat being broadcast to millions. Maher stood up as well, matching her aggressive posture. Platform hate? You mean like when I give people the chance to defend their obviously fabricated victim narratives? You came on this show knowing exactly what kind of host I am. And now you're crying foul because I didn't kiss your ass like every other sycophantic interviewer you've bought and paid for. Bought and paid for? Markle's voice had reached a pitch that suggested she was beyond rational thought now. You think I buy interviews? You arrogant piece of shit. I came here as a courtesy, and you've spent the entire time trying to humiliate me for your own entertainment. The second F-bomb variant seemed to break whatever remaining professional decorum had been holding the situation together. Members of the production crew were now visible at the edges of the shot, clearly unsure whether to intervene or let this train wreck continue to its inevitable conclusion. Humiliate you? Maher laughed, but it was a harsh, ugly sound that had nothing to do with humor. Lady, you've humiliated yourself. You've spent years crafting this image of yourself as some kind of modern-day Princess Diana, fighting against an oppressive system, when really you're just another fame-hungry actress who couldn't handle the fact that being a royal actually requires work. That comparison to Princess Diana was the final straw. Something in Markle's expression shifted from anger to pure rage, and when she spoke, her voice was low and deadly. Don't you dare. Don't you fucking dare compare me to Diana. You have no right to invoke her name while you're sitting here trying to destroy another woman who dared to speak truth about that family. Truth? Maher was yelling now too, all pretense of hosting a civilized show completely abandoned. Your truth changes every time you tell it. One minute you're the naive American who didn't know what she was getting into. The next minute you're the seasoned activist who was going to change everything from the inside. Which is it, Meghan? Because it can't be both. The confrontation had now reached a level of intensity that made everyone in the studio, audience members, crew, producers, visibly uncomfortable. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was two people engaged in mutual character assassination, with no regard for the consequences. Markle grabbed her purse from beside her chair, her movements sharp and aggressive. You know what, Bill? Fuck this, fuck you, and fuck this pathetic excuse for journalism. I came here to talk about important issues, and instead, I got ambushed by a washed-up comedian who thinks cruelty equals courage. She turned toward the exit, but Maher wasn't finished with her yet. Running away, Meghan? Just like you ran away from your family. Just like you ran away from the royal family. Just like you run away from everything the moment it gets difficult. Markle spun back around, her eyes blazing with fury. I don't run away from anything. I remove myself from toxic situations created by small, bitter people who mistake cruelty for intelligence. Enjoy your ratings, you miserable fuck. The studio erupted as she stormed toward the exit, her heels clicking loudly against the floor in the otherwise silent space. But just as she reached the edge of the set, she turned back one final time, her voice carrying across the studio with crystal clarity. And just so we're clear, Bill, when this airs, everyone's going to see exactly what kind of man you really are. Not the edgy comedian, not the fearless truth-teller, just a bitter old man who gets his kicks from attacking women. I hope it was worth it. With that, she was gone, leaving behind a studio full of stunned audience members, a production crew scrambling to figure out how to end the show, and Maher standing alone on his set, looking like a man who had won the battle but might have just lost the war. As the cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of the aftermath, Maher attempted to regain his composure, but the damage was done. The confrontation had spiraled so far beyond the bounds of normal television that there was no way to salvage it, no way to spin it as anything other than what it was. A complete meltdown that would be replayed, analyzed, and debated for months to come. The show ended not with Maher's usual closing monologue, but with an awkward fade to black as producers scrambled to cut to commercial, leaving viewers with the image of an empty chair and the echo of Markle's final, devastating words. It was television history, but not the kind anyone involved would want to be remembered for.